Hi everyone, my name is KHenry, and today I'll be walking us through Tucky and colleagues' article on workplace bullying and cognitive performance. We often think of bullying as a schoolyard problem, but it absolutely shows up in the workplace too. And this article looks at how it doesn't just hurt our feelings, but actually affects how we think. Let's start with what workplace bullying actually means. It's not just someone being rude once, it's repeated, persistent negative acts that create a hostile environment. This can include things like exclusion, verbal aggression, or undermining someone's work. Now, research has shown for years that bullying leads to stress, anxiety, depression, and lower job satisfaction. But here's the twist. This article asks, what happens to our thinking abilities when bullying occurs? That question really matters in the context of cognitive psychology. In the article from Goldstein, we learned that our cognitive resources, like attention and working memory, are limited. When stress takes over, it drains these resources. So think about it like this. Imagine trying to write a paper, but someone keeps sending you angry emails or making passive aggressive comments in meetings. You might still get the paper done, but it's going to take more effort and you'll probably miss things you wouldn't have if your mind was clear. This is where rumination comes in. So, rumination means replaying those negative interactions in your head, sometimes over and over. If you've ever had an argument with a coworker or even a family member or a friend, and then spent the whole evening thinking about what you should have said, you've experienced rumination. The problem is, while your mind is stuck on that loop, it's not focusing on the tasks that actually matter. So the big question of the study is, how do stress and rumination from bullying spill over into cognitive performance? And that's what Tucky and colleagues wanted to test. Here's why this research matters. From a cognitive standpoint, our brains work like systems with limited processing power. You've probably experienced this yourself. On a stressful day, you might forget small details, make careless mistakes, or just feel mentally slower. That fogginess a lot of us talk about sometimes. Cognitive load theory tells us that stress functions like extra weight on our working memory. Instead of using that space for problem solving or learning, part of it is tied up with stress responses. And this lines up with research on divided attention too. So if part of your mind is focused on workplace bullying, even if you're just replaying a snide comment or worrying about another confrontation, then your attention is divided. That can make your performance suffer even if you're technically still doing your job. Past studies have already shown links between bullying and job performance, absenteeism, and turnover. But here's the gap. Not many studies have looked at the direct cognitive effects. That's the contribution of this paper, connecting bullying to measurable changes in memory and attention, not just to how people feel about their jobs. So the researchers wanted to know three main things. First, they wanted to know if bullying directly predicts poor cognitive outcomes. This is the most straightforward question. If someone is bullied, do they actually perform worse on attention and memory tasks? That's the basic test of whether bullying affects thinking, not just feelings. Second, they asked whether stress and rumination act as mediators. A mediator is kind of like the middleman in a chain reaction. So you can think of it as bullying doesn't necessarily zap your attention instantly. Instead, bullying causes stress, and stress eats away at your cognitive resources. Or bullying makes you ruminate, replaying the bullying event in your mind, and that rumination interferes with your ability to focus on the task in front of you. So stress and rumination are the how behind the relationship. Third, they tested whether coworker support works as a moderator. A moderator changes the strength of the relationship. So imagine two employees who are both bullied. One feels completely alone while the other has supportive coworkers who encourage them or step in. The one with social support might still struggle, but not necessarily as much because that support cushions the cognitive load. So, overall, the researchers hypothesized that bullying would predict lower cognitive performance, stress and rumination would amplify that effect, and coworker support would reduce the harm. I personally like how these questions are both theoretical and practical. They give us insight into cognitive psychology, but also hint at strategies workplaces can actually use. In the study, they surveyed employees from several industries and made sure to have a good mix of backgrounds and job roles. The measures included a workplace bullying scale to capture frequency and intensity, a stress questionnaire, a rumination scale, which is basically how often someone replays bullying incidents in their head, and of course, demographics like age and job type were recorded so they could control for other factors. One of the coolest things about this study is that they didn't just rely on surveys of how distracted people felt. They actually tested cognitive performance. Participants completed attention tasks which involved reaction time measures. For example, they might have been shown a visual or auditory cue and had to respond as quickly and accurately as possible. The slower and less accurate the responses, the more we could infer that their attention was compromised in that time. They also did working memory tasks, such as memory span or recall. Imagine being asked to remember a sequence of numbers or letters and repeat them back in order. The more your mind is preoccupied, the harder this becomes. What's important is that these are performance-based measures, not just self-report. So that gives researchers stronger evidence because it's not just me saying, I feel distracted, but you can actually see, here's how you actually performed under cognitive testing. Now, the study design was cross-sectional. That means that all of this data was collected at one point in time so we can identify patterns but not prove causality. Still, by combining bullying surveys, stress and rumination measures, and cognitive tasks, the researchers could test whether bullying predicts real-world cognitive outcomes. So, what did they actually find? Overall, bullying had a strong negative relationship with cognitive performance. Employees who reported higher levels of bullying performed worse on task. The areas that were most affected were attention and working memory. People were slower to respond in attention-based tasks and had more trouble keeping information in mind during memory tasks. That might sound abstract, but think about everyday work. Slower attention means you might miss an important email or overlook a small error. Weaker working memory could mean struggling to keep track of multiple steps in a project or forgetting instructions you just received. These aren't just lab tasks, they mirror the kinds of mistakes that can build up in real jobs. I do want us to be clear, it wasn't just a straight line from bullying to poor performance. Stress and rumination explained a lot of the relationship. Rumination especially stood out. People who couldn't stop replaying bullying experiences in their minds showed the biggest drop in performance. It's like trying to concentrate on a meeting while your brain is running a highlight reel of yesterday's conflict. You just don't have the bandwidth. Stress also partially mediated the effect, which makes sense because chronic stress uses up mental resources. We do see an area for hope though. Coworker support mattered. Employees who had supportive colleagues didn't experience as steep a decline in cognitive performance, even when they were bullied. So the social environment can soften the blow. So What does all of this mean? Basically, bullying is a cognitive drain. It's not just about emotion, it actually eats up the mental resources we need for focus, memory, and decision making. This fits with cognitive load theory, which tells us that stress reduces working memory capacity. And it's like divided attention research. If your mind is split between work and replaying bullying incidents, you're not going to perform at your best. Like any study, this one has limitations. First, the design was cross sectional. That means everything was measured at one point in time. While we can see strong correlations between bullying and poor cognitive performance, we can't say for sure that bullying caused the drop in cognition. It's possible that people who already were struggling cognitively perceive bullying more strongly, or that a third factor is influencing both. To get a clearer picture, we need longitudinal studies that allow us to follow people over time. Second, some of the measures rely on self-report, like the bullying and stress questionnaires. Self-report is useful, but it comes with biases. For example, some employees might underreport bullying because they normalize it, while others might overreport because they're especially sensitive to negative interactions. That doesn't mean the data is invalid, but it does add a layer of complexity. Finally, the study mostly looked at cognition through behavioral tasks. Future research could get more precise by using neuroimaging or physiological measures. For example, brain scans could show which regions are most affected by bullying-related stress, and cortisol measures could give us biological evidence of stress reactions. That would add another layer of validity beyond surveys and tasks. So while this study makes an important contribution, it's also a stepping stone for more advanced and causal research. So what can organizations do with this? First, treat bullying as more than just a morale issue. It's a performance issue too. That means prevention policies, clear reporting systems, and training managers to recognize and address bullying. They can also offer resilience programs or mindfulness training to help reduce rumination, which eats up cognitive resources. When we think about broader implications, the findings of this study aren't just academic, they're practical and in some cases life or death. Take healthcare, for instance. A nurse who's being bullied may be so mentally drained that they forget a medication step or miss an important patient cue. In aviation, a distracted pilot could overlook a small but critical system alert. In law enforcement, slowed reaction times might mean failing to respond effectively in an emergency. These examples highlight that bullying doesn't just hurt individuals emotionally, it can create ripple effects that put others at risk. Another implication is organizational culture. If bullying is ignored, it becomes normalized and the cognitive costs spread across teams. Employees may disengage, creativity can drop, and even collaboration suffers because people don't feel safe speaking up. Over time, this can reduce innovation and overall organizational performance. So when we talk about anti-bullying interventions, it's not only about protecting employee well-being, it's also about protecting the quality of work, the safety of operations, and in some field, even the lives of others. That's why the authors argue for stronger organizational interventions, because the cost of ignoring bullying aren't just HR issues, they're strategic and societal issues as well. So, to wrap up, Tuckey and his colleagues showed that workplace bullying impairs cognition, mainly through stress and rumination. That gives us a new way to think about the cost of bullying. It's not only harming people emotionally, it's literally slowing down their thinking. I'd love to leave you guys with this question. So, if you were an HR director, how might you measure or detect the cognitive impacts of bullying in real time? I really appreciate you guys for listening and sitting through with this with me. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.